Hey there guys, it's Metro, and today we're back with a really special video. Today we're going to be talking about a topic a lot of people have asked me about recently, that being how to maximize Dancing Rune Weapon's usage, especially in Mythic Plus dungeons. Typically, I would consider this topic out of my wheelhouse, as I operate on feel and trend more than attempting to use math for precisional optimization. But I do believe that this is an ability where using it where it feels right is as important as how to mathematically optimize its usage. So I'm happy to offer what assistance I can give with my own opinions and experience. If there was one unique thing I can offer to many discussions like this, it's a historical appreciation for its legacy. Even though this guide is obviously on Battle for Azeroth, understanding how the ability was strong in the past will give you better insight into how to maximize it now, but also in the future if things change again. The spell itself has been through many ups and downs. It used to be a 1.5 minute CD, then it was changed to a 3-minute CD in Legion, and now it's back to a 2-minute CD in BFA. And that's just one example. At one point, it gave 50% parry, another point it gave 20% parry, but now it's settled in at 40% parry throughout Legion and BFA. Likely most notable though was the Dance of Darkness artifact trait in Legion that allowed us to extend the duration of Dancing Rune Weapon substantially. This, combined with how it synergized with Legion's hemostasis, was very unique, and its removal is among the biggest nerfs to any single spell any tank has ever seen. But as a concession, we've actually been given an Azerite trait known as Eternal Rune Weapon. Many were very critical of my love for this trait in Season 1, before the extra ring was added to Azerite gear especially. But with this historical perspective in mind, you begin to understand why elongating the spell is just as important as actually using it well in the first place. And this example, I feel, is crucial to understand for any of you out there who don't feel like you're currently optimizing Blood Death Knight or the spell's usage. Alright, let's now talk about what I've come to value in this spell and how that might impact my usage. A traditional tank player may likely look at the spell's very potent defensive element and think the core usage of the spell is simply for that benefit. But with the historical background we have presented, we should come to realize that even now in its more nerf state, its value as a second form of output is equally important and can be even more useful than the 40% parry it grants. In the past, the spell would copy far more things, especially when we had multiple diseases in WoD or weapons with on-damage procs, and as mentioned, things like the Hemostasis Legion Legendary. It should be noted that it does not share many of these interactions in Battle for Azeroth, and the amount of things copied are considerably limited, and specifically, it does not interact with Hemostasis in its new talent form, sadly. But with all this in mind, my main consideration using this spell is maximizing its ability to copy Blood Boil and the Blood Plagues from Blood Boil. I believe this to be the most potent usage of the spell, and if maximized, will lead to the largest swing of efficacy any spell in our entire kit can offer. This is mainly thanks to Eternal Rune Weapon, both the strength it offers and the duration extension, as the extra duration allows for extra blood boils, further allowed for by more haste. This is absolutely critical to maximizing the spell, and either ignoring the trait or not extending the spell will reduce your effectiveness immensely. So before thinking further, work on making sure you can check these boxes. In the end, the primary objective is to get as many blood boils out as possible, then save one for the last global possible to make sure you reapply the extra dot for its maximized duration. Doing this is complicated in its own right, as you'll see later. Now let's break down all the conditions for usage of the spell in priority to help you understand when and where I use it in order to get a better understanding of how it can then be optimized. Number 1, I use this spell on the very rare chance that you absolutely need to maximize your ability to parry a physical mechanic. Only current case I'm aware of is the Conqueror's backhand armor debuff in the Council 3rd boss of King's Rest, but any similar mechanic that can be parried to great effect will make you use Dancing Rune Weapon very suboptimally around its maximization in this use. Number 2, I use the spell whenever we have Bloodlust available. The extra haste from Lust will dramatically increase your ability to maximize Eternal Rune Weapon and Blood Boil throughout it. I believe it is worth saving for Lust, provided Lust is used well, especially if you have other things like potions or trinkets up during it all. Ideally, this would just happen at the start of every raid fight where you already have all your CDs available or on some increased damage phase. Number 3, I use the spell whenever there is a very large or dangerous pack in front of me, and I believe it is worth saving the spell for this situation without hesitation, especially if you're using potions or trinket CDs. Always lead with Dancing Rune Weapon to maximize its window, maximize offense and threat from it, and give yourself the extra time to build resources towards maximizing the next 15 plus seconds of the pack using Bone Storm and Vamp Blood. Using Vamp Blood, especially during Rune Weapon, is a very bad habit of mine due to the frequency of resets from Red Thirst in Legion. And even now, I still make this mistake all the time, but 9 out of 10 times, you should be attempting to stagger their usage apart from each other, as Red Thirst is no longer used this way or anywhere near as potent. And number 4, use it when you know you need snap threat or range damage on some priority target. This is to mostly benefit from Eternal Rune Weapon's extra strength. Best example I can give is on Champion of the Light, first boss in BOD. I'm tanking adds very far away from the boss by design, but the adds are absolutely inconsequential in terms of my output. On the opener, I place D&D and use Rune Weapon on the boss instead of my current tanking target, and use the extra strength to buff a Blood Drinker into the boss, then hit the adds to maximize my window. Very niche, but anytime you want to maximize your burst on a target and can't be in melee range of it, Rune Weapon is great for that, provided you can have something that can be meleeed in your range and don't need it for any defensive reason at all. This basically only ever happens in raids. So those are the 4 main situations I would find myself attempting to use the spell in, and some light description on how I would optimize it. The most common one is obviously on large and dangerous packs in Mythic Plus, and this is the place where everybody should be trying to learn ways to maximize it. It's easy to use for the other situations, but just using it on every trash pack it's up for will not be appropriate. You should be prioritizing using it on the pull of any pack as well, as this is when you'll be the most vulnerable as a Blood DK, and obviously the highest likelihood you'll be able to maximize other things like pre-potions and CDs. Using it deep into the duration of any trash should only be done if you are sure it wouldn't be needed for the next pack or 2 coming up, or if you're using it in the next pack or 2 would prevent its CD from being back up for a known dangerous pack coming up after that. The best way to summarize this is simply use it on the largest, most dangerous pulls you'll do in every dungeon, as you'll be able to maximize its offense and its defense, and it will make the initial wave of melees considerably less dangerous. And finally, let's discuss how to maximize the usage of its window, as even with the Eternal Rune Weapon trait, it can be painfully small if you're not 100% prepared. One of the main criticisms of this trait early on was it's making you stronger when you're already at your strongest, quote unquote. But anyone who has ever done any timed dungeon content in World of Warcraft should know that maximizing your strengths and then covering your weaknesses is the key to success. And as such, maximizing your window with the strength you'll be given will be incredibly important to lend delete potential to any dangerous pack. You should be aware that every ability copied by Rune Weapon will do about 1/3 of the damage of the original spell. They can all independently crit as well, so if you're blood boiling 5+ mobs, you may easily see your Rune Weapon spell do as much damage as your own if they are critting often and yours are not, but it doesn't actually change the rotation much depending on the mob density. Whatever you prioritize for damage outside of the window should be the same priority within the window, with these key exceptions. You should try to use Blood Boil to reapply plagues right at the end of a window. Hard Strike will generate 5 extra runic power per hit, so you should use this if you're trying to cap for Bone Storm or Vamp Blood, or you don't need Bone Shield during the window. And Marrow Rend will generate an additional usage worth of Bone Shield, so you should end up with 6 total each cast at least, potentially more thanks to the Bones of the Damned trait. This will also be the best single global to extend the duration with, so I do find it acceptable to overcap at times. With that in mind, my basic window template might look like this. Step 0. Drop D&D pre-pull, just in front of the pull so to not waste the global, but also to not pull the target. Step 1. First global always is Dancing Rune Weapon. Step 2. Use up all your runes on Marrow Rend and then 2 Blood Boil charges as soon as possible. The order is going to depend on the amount of mob density heavily, or potential previous rune availability, and if you have prior Bone Shield charges. If you already have 5+ Bone Shield charges, do not use multiple globals on Marrow Rend. Maybe don't use any globals on Marrow Rend. Step 3. Fill with any type of extension you can get, and if you're already on full AoE, be ready to use Blood Boil again the second it comes up so you could potentially get a 4th one in. And step 4, try to finish with that 4th Blood Boil, which will likely only be possible during Lust or if you have very high haste procs. If you cannot get the 4th in, then you should be saving the 3rd for the end of the window. So this is a very basic general principle I consider when using the spells. Many things will change down to the global based on the CDs you might have available, talents you might have, the amount of mobs you might be fighting, if you're trying to use Rune Weapon purely for offense or purely for defense, and especially whether or not you have Bloodlust up. So let's go to a live demonstration to better explain some of these nuances. Okay, so what we're going to do here is run through some situations for Dancing Rune Weapon. There's a couple different use cases. This is why I really was a little hesitant to make this video, because there's so many different ways to maximize it and so many different scenarios that you could use it under. But like we talked about, the basic window template, it's something like that. You want to make sure you're using Blood Boil and getting as much rune usage out of it as possible. So the big trick here is not wasting a global on Death and Decay. Okay, it's not going to be possible here because we're looking at training dummies, but typically you would want to drop it just in front of the mobs. And then when you pull with Dancing Rune Weapon, the mob is going to run into your Death and Decay. So it's effectively like you dropped it, but you didn't waste a global within Dancing Rune Weapon, because it's, without question, the least effective global. And the quicker you can get that on CD, the quicker it will go away and you'll have a chance to get the haste proc. So ideally you would get the haste proc in the middle of Dancing Rune Weapon. You cannot get, I'm talking about the Bloody Rune Blade haste proc. Okay, I have 2 of these, so it's even more important for me. You cannot get Crimson Scourge to activate when Death and Decay is down. You cannot have a second Death and Decay down, right? So you will never have that happen. So you want to get D&D down immediately. Obviously, if you're pulling a single mob, maybe it's better to just not even use D&D. There's a whole branch of people out there who think it's better to just not even use D&D on a single target because of this massive haste proc, especially if you have multiple of these traits. So I don't know. I don't really think too much about that, but regardless, we're assuming for big AoE, you're going to want D&D down, especially. It's just free damage, and obviously it's going to help everything that you do. So, yeah, you're going to put it down. Okay, so put it down before the pull. All right, I actually clipped the mob with it. Not ideal, but regardless, you then open, build with that, 2 Blood Boils, and then at this point, I'm just trying to extend Dancing Rune Weapon as much as I can using Blood Boil again when it comes up. And that is that. As you see, I'm not going to get any haste procs, or, well, I will get some, but not nearly enough to get another Blood Boil out. So the goal here is, this is kind of more for an AoE style. I really like to kind of over cap on Marrow Rend, on Bone Shield. A lot of people don't really like to do that. People would say don't waste it, like we talked about. I think it's worth over capping, especially because it's the most, you only have so many globals in here. Ideally, you would extend it the full duration every time. It's unrealistic that that's going to happen. You're going to make mistakes. Things are not going to go ideally. You might be out of range for a split second, something like that. I don't know. It's not going to happen every single time you use Dancing Rune Weapon. The higher haste percentage you have, the more likely it can happen. So again, with Bloodlust, that does make a lot of options available to you. But really, if you're trying to get maximum value out of haste, I would just try to worry about getting that extra Blood Boil in, because unless you're only fighting a single target, Blood Boil is going to be the most effective thing you can do to AoE scenario, any type of like 3+ target scenario, which is really the main crux of what I'm looking at here with Blood, for Dancing Rune Weapon maximization, because it's the bread and butter. You're using this ability to make up for your losses at the start of a massive AoE pull and maximize your offense throughout it, potentially set you up for the next 20 seconds of the pull as well. Ideally, you'll be finishing with very near to 100 runic power going right into Bone Storm. You might also want to use Bone Storm during Eternal Rune Weapon if you're only worried about offense. If you're only worried about offense, using Eternal Rune Weapon as one of these spells in the window is actually, using Bone Storm as one of the spells in the window is actually ideal, because it will maximize the DPS during Bone Storm. You might even want to use Bone Storm before the pull if you're fully committed to maximizing offense. Open with Bone Storm so you get 9 seconds with Rune Weapon strength up, and you're going to definitely do crazy DPS. But I don't really use these spells this way. When I'm doing 5-mans, I'm doing 5-mans that are dangerous to me. I'm always worried about topping the HPS chart, making myself as survival-oriented as possible first and foremost, and then maximizing DPS second. But with Rune Weapon, it's really one and the same, because it's just passive defense the whole time, and then small maximizations with that. So that's going into it with no Marrow Rend. So let's take a look at what it looks like if you have full Marrow Rend stacks beforehand. Ideally, we wouldn't have runic power, but it's just this is a complication that you're going to have happen all the time, right? So the same thing, you already have that. You open with that. Open now. You don't have to waste anything, so you can just go 2 Blood Boils and just go full Hard Strikes. Spend a little runic power because you don't want to waste it, and then again, you're just sitting here trying to get as much extension as possible. And we do actually get the 4th Blood Boil in there, so Yeah, so that's where you're at. If you could use a bunch of runes on Heartstrike and you don't have to worry about marrow rending at all for bone shields, that would be the ideal situation. But again, that's again really focused on offense. For me, I think extending the dot on multiple targets is very important, but it does not help you defensively. The extra dot from Rune Weapon will not leech to you. Okay, that doesn't work that way. It's going to leech to the weapon. And even when the weapon dies, it's still going to be doing damage. But getting that extra full refresh on Marrow Rend might be more important. Spending 2 globals at the end to fully extend Dancing Rune Weapon might be a better use of your 1 global for the rest, for the next 20 seconds kind of thing. Because if you use it, if you go into it, let's say with this scenario, we're obviously not going to have the Dancing Rune Weapon up for this, but, so we now have 30 seconds of this, right? Well, Dancing Rune Weapon's going to come up. We're going to use it. By the time it's over, Marrow Rend might have dropped. You see, you're looking at the timer on the screen. You're thinking about it might drop after Dancing Rune Weapon. Well, guess what? This is really bad. You know what I mean? You just had a key example of where you could have used this to maximize your bone shield, but at the same time, you didn't need any charges from it. You just needed to extend it, right? So, like, there's so many things to think about with this spell. It's really a case-by-case basis. So I think the best way to go about ending this video is just, if you guys have any, cases that you think you would like to hear my thoughts on, let me know. But otherwise, if you can get 4 blood boils in the window, do it. It's going to require a lot of haste. It might require some haste procs. Probably going to be extremely easy with Bloodlust, but that's the way you want to do it. 2 blood boils out of the gate. Whether it's surrounded by a Marrow Rend, you can do that. The thing is, you really want to get Marrow Rend out as quickly as possible because it's going to increase the amount of haste you have, obviously, so the more blood boils you're going to get. So let's see what happens here when we do it like this. Obviously, we're not getting any haste procs here, unfortunately. We have so many haste procs that we could get to. That's the thing. But yeah, not even close to getting a 4th blood boil. So you really need haste procs. You're really going to need probably Bloodlust as well. It makes it even easier, but you're going to need a little bit of luck to make this happen. But if you can make it happen, if you can get that extra blood boil off at the last global that you could possibly fit in with Rune Weapon, it's going to dramatically improve your DPS. And that's really the trick. I feel like that's the big deal. So either try to maximize blood boil or try to maximize bone shield. Those are the 2 things you want to think about. So anyway, thanks for watching. If you guys have some specifics or you want to learn even more, let me know. I could honestly, if I had the time, I could make like a full, probably like a multi-minute segment on each of these different scenarios. It's just, the scenarios are so niche, it's so hard to apply them, and it's so hard to set up for them that I don't know if it would be worth anybody's time. So if you want to hear more, I'm happy to discuss it down below. Otherwise, thanks for watching this video. Maybe I'll do more like this. I could see myself kind of doing another video like this on Vamp Blood, or maybe even Icebound and AMS. Maybe, I think especially AMS might have some big usage. So if you guys have some ideas where you would like to hear my opinions on more Death Knight specific topics like this, please let me know. Otherwise, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.